Consider yourself a student of all things sweet, savory, and altogether scrumptious. Then you might think you're ready to sauté. But think again. These common mistakes could mean the difference between culinary heaven and a meal from hell. When it comes to sautéing, any pan won't do. You need to use a proper sauté pan designed specifically for that use. That's according to Jairo Ducos, Director of Operations and House Chef at the Deglazing Cooking School in New York City. He says, you want a pan with a heavy bottom and sloped sides. That way the heat will distribute more evenly and you'll be able to toss around all your proteins and ingredients more efficiently. Heavy bottom pans allow for a more even transfer of heat, while the sloped sides allow greater access to the food, so you can more easily keep everything moving. As for pan type, Ducos says, the material the pan is made with doesn't really matter. He likes stainless steel, aluminium, or cast iron. You should also lean towards the largest pan possible versus one that is too small, which causes your ingredients to pile on top of each other. You'll know you have a good pan if you add a bit of oil to the bottom and see bubbles all over as the pan heats up. If you just see isolated bubbles in a couple of spots, that means the pan has hot spots. Ducos says, it's worth the money investing in a good sauté pan, but you only need one, you don't need a lot.
Let's get cooking.
Whether you're sautéing fresh diced veggies or your favourite protein, sautéing always requires a little bit of oil. But to sauté properly, you also have to pick the right oil, one that will stand up to the sautéing process. Sadly, that's where many home cooks go wrong, LA chef Stephen Chavez says. He explains, when you're sautéing, make sure you're using an oil that can handle relatively high heat or that has a high smoke point. Chavez's go-to options include soy, canola, safflower, or sunflower oil. He adds, you can also use avocado oil or coconut oil, which is a little bit more trendy. You can sauté in extra virgin olive oil, but I don't recommend it. It tends to burn and turn bitter at a higher heat. I don't recommend regular olive oil either. It's just not great for sautéing. Despite its great salty flavour, butter is also a no-go for sautéing, because all those delicious milk fats are prone to burning at high heat. If you have to get that butter taste in your meal, you could search the market for an Indian product called ghee, which is a clarified butter with the milk fats removed. Chavez says, we use that a lot in culinary school because butter is going to give you a great flavour, but I still usually pair it with a little bit of oil as well. Using the right temperature is essential if you want to properly sauté your food, forming that perfect crust while also locking in all the flavour and moisture you need. For Lisa Counts, executive chef at the Chopping Block Culinary School in Chicago, that means sautéing over high heat, but only for a short period of time. She says, you should always preheat your pan before sautéing. I believe in adding the oil to the pan and preheating them together. When the oil starts shimmering or is just about to smoke, that's the indicator of when the pan is hot enough to start sautéing. Getting your fry right means more than just preheating the pan, however. You also need to cook at the right temperature. Counts says, it's always best to sauté on a medium-high heat. It's always easier to turn down the heat, but it's harder to bring it back up again. Plus, if you start too low, then you run the risk of ingredients absorbing much of the fat and ending up tasting greasy. On the other hand, if you start too high, you risk burning your meal before it has had a chance to cook through.
Yum.
Jairo Ducos agrees on sticking with medium to medium-high heat. He says, you want the cooking process to start immediately when you drop your protein or vegetable into the pan. If it doesn't, then you end up slow cooking or poaching your food instead of sautéing it, and you risk everything drying out. Many of us might think that sautéing means piling a ton of ingredients in a pan or wok and then cooking everything at once. But when you do this, you aren't actually sautéing your food. You're steaming it. Heat causes moisture to evaporate from your various ingredients, and all that steam ends up cooking your food when it should be the oil. This leads to limp, soggy protein and veggies instead of crispy, sautéed ingredients. As Lisa Counts says, there should be very minimal overlap of food in the pan. Ideally, if you can still see the bottom of the pan just a tiny bit through all of the food, that is a good amount to be sautéing. Chef Stephen Chavez agrees. He explains, "The more crowded your pan is, the more your ingredients are going to be touching each other, and the more likely they are to steam instead of getting a good crispy seal or crust." Nobody likes flavourless food, and if you're going to the effort of making a nice sautéed meal, you definitely don't want your poor spice game to put people off. Luckily, amping up the flavour in any sautéed dish isn't hard. According to Chef Chavez, creating a great-tasting sauté all comes down to seasoning. This means adding salt and pepper at proper levels and at the right times, and including fresh herbs or dried spices in your dish to increase the natural flavours. He says, "When you season, you want to season all the way through the cooking process. So even before I put my ingredients into the pan, I may toss each of them individually with a bit of salt and pepper, and then I taste as the food cooks and add more salt and pepper as needed. As for flavouring with herbs and spices, that should generally happen at the end," says Salvatore Rizzo, owner and CEO of the Deglazing cooking school. As he explains, "You don't want your herbs or spices to end up burnt, unless it's a rub or crust on your beef or chicken or pork. I always prefer adding any fresh herbs or dried spices near the end of the cooking process, so they don't overcook or become bitter." Sautéing food basically means ensuring all your ingredients are jumping in the sauté pan. Doing that, Chef Christopher Diamond says, can be as simple as keeping everything moving as you cook. Diamond explains, "You want almost constant movement in your pan. Grab your big metal or wooden spoon or a large spatula and just keep moving everything around so it's being exposed to the hot oil on all sides and can cook through." To make your sautéing more impressive, you can also use the tossing technique commonly seen on TV. And this is easier than it looks, Stephen Chavez says. "The most important thing to remember is that it's just a little push. As long as your pan has sloped edges, you just give it a little gentle push forward, and the food will go up in the air like someone going off a skateboard ramp. Then, all you have to do is catch it."
Excellent!
To practice, Chavez suggests putting a piece of bread in a pan and then tossing it and catching it. From there, you can move on to dried beans, and then actual food you are cooking. Moisture and humidity are the enemies of sautéing, and one of the most important mistakes to avoid when sautéing anything is to not let your ingredients get too wet. Whether you're overcrowding your sauté pan, you aren't drying your ingredients after washing them, or you're just cooking something that contains a lot of natural moisture, you don't want any extra liquid in your sauté. This is because that liquid will evaporate and create steam. Chavez says, "Sautéing is a dry cooking method. It is not a moist cooking method. Don't put something that's been in a marinade into your pan without removing that excess moisture. If you do, you're not going to get that crispy brown crust you want from your sauté." Since sautéing involves relatively high temperatures, hot oil, and a short cooking period, it can be incredibly easy to overcook your food. Even if you don't technically burn it, meat can come out chewy, vegetables might get mushy, or the whole dish can just seem dry and tough. For Chef Counts, actually watching the progression of the food as it cooks helps her to figure out when a sautéed dish is done. She says, "I generally tell people they need to trust their gut. I am always tasting my food as I cook. The same goes for sautéing. ABT, as we say in culinary school. Always be tasting." Chef Diamond follows a similar approach to keeping tabs on the food he is sautéing, primarily focusing on taste. He asks, "How do you tell when your dish is done?" You eat a piece of it. You've got to be tasting and eating constantly. You can't just rely on other factors like how long something has been cooking or what temperature it's been cooking at. Deglazing is when you use a liquid, such as wine or stock, to loosen and dissolve the browned bits of food left in a pan after cooking. It is most commonly used after roasting or searing, but if you're not deglazing after you sauté a meal, you're missing out on a wealth of flavour. Jairo Ducos says, "If you want to increase the flavour in any sautéed dish, deglazing is a great way to do it. You're scraping up all that goodness on the bottom of your sauté pan. It's fantastic."
So good.
The process of deglazing is easy too. You simply remove all of the cooked meat or vegetables from the pan, set them aside, and then add your liquid of choice until the bottom of the pan is submerged by about 1/4 of an inch. Add a bit of butter and simultaneously work to stir and scrape up all those brown bits from the bottom of the pan using a wooden spoon or a whisk. This is called making a pan sauce. Lisa Counts explains, I describe deglazing as adding a liquid to the pan in order to cool it down, clean the drippings from the bottom of the pan, and create a sauce which can add depth of flavour to your dish. Generally, you deglaze with wine, spirits, citrus, or vinegar, but water can work as well. Whichever you use, the sauce will absorb some of that flavour. If you've ever been deep in the midst of rustling up an incredible dish, only to turn your back for a second and return to a pan full of burned garlic, take heart. You're not alone. Chef Ducos says, I would have to say, especially with our classes, that burned garlic is a big problem for a lot of home cooks. People just don't know the timing of putting the garlic in their pan. Because garlic is packed with natural sugars, amino acids, and sulfur compounds, it burns incredibly easily whenever it comes into contact with a hot surface. Chef Counts explains, when adding garlic to a sauté, the rule I always follow is adding it when the vegetables are about 95% cooked. Garlic only takes about 30 seconds to a minute to cook through, so it doesn't need to be in a pan for very long. Christopher Diamond says that this is the exact reason why you should have your ingredients pre-chopped before you start sautéing. He says, you always want to have your next thing ready to go when you are cooking, and especially when you are sautéing. Step away for a second to get something, and your whole dish, including the garlic, could be ruined.